There we go. We should be ready to go now. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. So I'm Amy Williams. I'm the founder of Parenting Through Prana, and today we are going to discuss how the heart-crown connection is the ultimate win-win for parents and children. So first, I'm so excited to be here. I've talked about this before, but I feel that the audience today is going to have more pranic healers in it. And so I'm excited to get to go a little bit deeper into the energetic aspects of what I generally talk about. So to begin with, I wanted to talk about how I came into parenting through prana. Like, how did this develop, and what brought it to where it is now? So when I became a parent, I had no concept of the idea of peaceful parenting or like a heart-centered connecting parenting. I've been raised in a very authoritarian household. And so that was just kind of how I came into approaching parenting. And just the idea that the parents are the authority, and you make children be obedient. But then I became a parent, and as the saying goes, I was the best parent in the world until I became a parent. And then suddenly I had all these responsibilities. And the way that I had been raised and the parenting strategies that I had seen around me, they didn't sit right inside of me. So common techniques of yelling and spanking and punishing and threatening, those things just did not feel good to me as a parent. And I sat thinking with myself that I worked so hard to create these tiny human beings, and I love them with my entire being. I would do absolutely anything for them. And yet here I am creating this harm as I am trying to parent them. I thought there has to be a better way of doing this. And so, like I think most American first time moms do, I got all the parenting books, right? Okay, maybe not all, but I did read quite a few. And so I tried the different strategies and the different ways of talking to them, and, saying when instead of if when giving choices, and all the different little things. And what what I came to feel inside of myself was that these strategies only worked the way the book said when that situation presented itself. And that situation presented itself very infrequently. So there were lots of other situations that were coming up where I didn't understand how to apply what the books were saying to do, because what it really came down to, I realized through my spiritual growth and practice, was simply my inner calmness was not there. And so when my inner calmness was not there, it didn't really matter what I was saying or what strategy I was trying to apply, because children feel our energy before they ever hear the words coming out of our mouths, before they see the actions. And that energy, because they are so connected to us when they're, especially when they're little, the energetic disconnect comes as they grow a little bit more, but especially when they're little, they are so energetically connected to us that they feel what we're feeling. When we're frustrated, they feel the frustration. When we're angry, they feel the anger. So even if you're saying the right words, even if you're using kind language, if inside it's not coming from a heart-centered space, they feel the disconnect. They feel the not heart-centeredness before they hear the words. Now, as adults, we recognize this with other adults. We know when somebody's just telling us what we want to hear and they don't really mean it, right? We understand when somebody is trying to placate us, but they don't really care very much. So what I found as a parent is a lot of times we have ideas that we understand between ourselves and other adults, but we don't apply them to these tiny human beings. It's like children and parents, there's such emotionally charged words. We immediately have ideas of almost like subservience, of authority in parents and subservience in children. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do is to kind of waylay some of that as we have our discussion today. and to view children as smaller human beings, not with the emotional charge around the idea of children. And for parents, think of it as a parent being, the being of parenting, as opposed to being a parent and all of the authority and assumed respect that we have around that idea. And I know we have people from all over the world watching, so maybe different culturally, but I think if we can kind of set those words aside and all that they mean, and we just simply look at human beings through this conversation, it's going to make a lot more sense, and it's going to go a lot more deeply into your hearts. So when we look at parenting and children, right? We often expect more from tiny, newer human beings than we do from older human beings. And that might create a knee-jerk reaction of that's not true. But I'm going to walk you through why in some cases it is. Now, we may not expect as much of small human beings as perhaps leaving the house and earning an income, or even in their physical responsibilities of what they need to do around their household. But we often expect more in their emotional capacity and their emotional maturity. When we see a 3-year-old being very emotionally upset, right? We often call that a tantrum. That's not a word I like to use very often because of, again, all the emotional charge around it. But we all know what I mean when I say a tantrum. So when you see a small child having a tantrum, we often expect that child to be able to stop right away. We see it as an act of control against the older human being in the presence. And we want to kind of often squash that. Unfortunately, that doesn't work very often. You can get them to stop, but it doesn't actually help with the situation that's happening inside of them. So one of the examples I love to give my parents when I coach is, what would it take for you as a fully formed adult to throw yourself on the ground, to scream and yell and flail and not care all about anyone around you? So I just want you to take a second and really think, like, how much turmoil would you have to have inside? How very upset would you have to be to act out in those ways? And for most of us, we cannot imagine at our age anything like that we would act that way, right? But you have to recognize that just because the small human being is doing that, it's not necessarily about control, right? They feel immensely out of control. What they're trying to do is get another sense of control within themselves. And because they don't have the filters and the maturity that we have to be able to have the emotion, have the thoughts, and have a pause before the actions, it all just kind of streams together and comes out. And no amount of punishment is going to change what's happening inside of that child. It will just simply change the way it's displayed. So it may no longer be displayed as a tantrum, but it may come out in other sorts of ways. But what we want to do as we are learning how to parent through prana is to come into our compassion for smaller human beings and recognizing that when they're behaving that way, they're simply having a natural human response. We're just a little bit further along. But most of the time, we expect them to be better than we are. Because if they don't stop the tantrum, what do? We throw a tantrum, right? We get mad, we get upset, we lash out through punishment, taking things away, denying them the love and connection that we would generally give to them, isolating them. So if we start to look at these things at an energetic level and not as our social conditioning towards how we should parent, you can see that if you have the emotions of anger, frustration, stress, loneliness, feeling out of control, and another human being comes into that situation and is overwhelmed by all of that, feels the same things, and then lashes out at the other one, that's not a harmonious situation. And a lot of times as parents, whether it be because we think that that's the right way to do it, or because we just simply have not learned how to do it differently yet, and we can't consistently apply that, that's a situation we find ourselves in. And that tends to be one of the most common, if you just want to look at a core issue in parenting, is that when emotions rise up, adults have not yet learned how to really handle and maturely transmute their own emotions and their own energy to a point where they can actually come in and be a pranic ally, using their energy as a help for those children. Instead, they come in, they get overwhelmed, and then now you have two people having a tantrum instead of just one. And one just happens to be much bigger and have much more authority and more control over the situation. And so that starts to look like success on some level, but energetically, it's only building and building and building. And what we want to be able to do is to bring soothing, loving energy into those situations, to calm it down and to bring the best out of everyone in that situation. So part of how I came to these conclusions and why this is so important to me is that, as you know, I'm a pranic healer and I practice Arhatic yoga. And what I would experience and feel at retreats and classes and through meditation, I feel this overwhelming peace and joy and happiness and connectedness. And I wanted to bring that into my family. And I thought, how do I make my kids feel this way, right? Because that's a lot of the way we're conditioned. How do we change them? How do we fix them? How do we get them to do certain things, right? And the more I tried that, the more it kind of backfired. Because I was coming at it from a situation of, you should do what I do. If you feel better, then I'll feel better, right? If you stop causing as many problems, I won't have as many problems to deal with and we'll all be happy. But it doesn't work that way. The way it works is through being able to have that within yourself and emanate that out into the situation. As most people in a spiritual practice learn at some point in time, is that it's your inner peace. And if you have that inner peace, then the things outside of you don't get in as much, right? The water can't sink the boat unless it gets in. That's what we want to be able to do as parents, as the leaders of our family, so that our children have a person worthy of imitation to follow. So I love that phrase. I think that's an excellent phrase to kind of like keep in your back pocket as a parent. Think of being an adult worthy of imitation. And when we do that, it shifts our mindset away from how do I get my kids to do this into how do I become the example worthy of imitation. And that isn't just in our actions. That isn't just, well, I do the laundry, but my child doesn't do the laundry. That's a state of being that we want to work on coming into. So I commonly say you have to put your oxygen mask on first. So when you're on the plane, what do they teach you? If the plane's going down, which I think we can all associate that feeling of when we have a situation with our children and things are crashing, right? When it's going down, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. So you have to take care of your inner state before you can handle that situation. And a lot of times we want that situation handled right now, right? We want to deal with all the things, get it all worked out, but emotions are often too high for us to actually be in a state to have any positive impact on that. And again, we may have the impression of success if we sort of win that situation, right? If we appear to come out on top, but what's happening is it's actually damaging our connections, our heart ties with our children. Now, one of the things I think that we would all like to see from our children is we want them to be smart, right? And we want them to be successful and we want them to be happy. And it wouldn't hurt if they also listened to us when we talk to them, right? It wouldn't hurt if they were also receptive. So um, part of doing this is creating that receptivity in them. So the reason that the heart crown connection is sort of the ultimate way to do this, what I found is that in my meditations, what made me come out of them wanting to be of greater service to my family and, wanting to share this peace and this joy was always the heart activation, right? The heart is activated, you're full of love. And when the heart gets activated, so does the crown chakra. These two working together creates just an amazing recipe for family life. We often see it applied just in our spiritual practice, especially if you're a pranic healer or you practice Arhatic yoga. But for me, I started recognizing how much this needed to be applied in my day-to-day life with my children all the time. And not just as a way to cultivate something in them, but because that was the way that I wanted to show up in my life with them. So when you activate your heart, the heart is the center for your earthly and emotional love, right? So the love you feel for your children or anything that you love in this life. But a wonderful side effect of activating the heart is that you also activate the crown. And when the crown is activated, in floods the divine light, in floods the divine love. Now you have a desire for unity, for service. You have more compassion. You start to see the oneness in life and in the world. And I really believe that we are at a point where we're going to start have a parenting sort of paradigm shift into this oneness instead of this authority subservient view of parenting. Because when we do this, when we have this view between us and our children, when we start to step into this oneness and we start to see ourselves as servants in our household, because what do they say? The fastest way to spiritual growth is through family life, right? But why is that? Because your family activates your heart, right? You love them even if they drive you nuts. They drive you nuts, but you love them. But we can take it a step further and we can use our ability to activate our hearts and activate our crowns to bring in a greater desire to be of service to them, to bring in a greater amount of divine love and compassion. It's kind of like the cooling the situation down. And when we activate our heart, all of our kind of stress emotions and stuff, we get our solar plexus super activated. When the heart is activated, it helps to regulate all those lower chakras and all of those stressed out emotions. Now, to me, that sounds like exactly what I need when I'm stressed out, especially when it comes to my children, because you don't want to be lashing out. And one thing that I noticed too, in kind of coming to these conclusions, was that I was often more willing to do this naturally for a stranger or for another adult than I was for my children. And that really had to do with a lot of my upbringing and subconscious kind of programming around the relationship between children and parents. And I'll kind of prove this for you. If you have ever been having a conflict in your home and then had to answer the phone, you go from stop doing that to hello, how are you? Oh, yes, everything's great. Yep. Okay, great. Yeah, I'll call you back. Hang up the phone back to why did you do that? I think most parents have had some sort of situation like that. where you're in the middle of dealing with this conflict, and then suddenly you have to interact with another adult, and it switches, like it's automatic, you know, oh, I can't behave that way. I have to behave better, right? So you behave better when you're interacting with the adult. And this is where I say a lot of times we're expecting more of the children than we are from ourselves, because that really illustrates that we know we should be behaving better. We have the capacity to, but for some reason, when it comes to interacting with our children, we don't think we have to. We don't exercise as much will in doing that. Now, if you're in that boat, that's okay. You know, it takes practice and it takes time, and it takes just reframing the way that we've been taught to deal with those daily challenges. And take a drink real quick. So one way that we can sort of de-escalate and not feel so emotional about this topic is if we start to look at what happens energetically through us, through our bodies, through our presence and our whole being when we activate the heart-crown connection. So the body is actually flooded with a beautiful pink light. So if you think about it like this, activating the heart is how much pink light do you have? So when things start to come in with love, you have a buffer around you. Now, you know the difference between when you just come out of meditation and things start going crazy around you, right? And you're like, oh, that's okay. Everything's fine. I'll deal with it. And when you haven't done meditation and everything is raw and every little thing is grating on you and you can almost feel it physically, like, oh, the sound is crushing me, right? If I hear those toys smack together one more time, if I trip over the shoes one more time, if I hear them bicker one more time, right? So we know the difference between those feelings, between having that buffer and not having that buffer. But it's my view that as parents, we deserve to always have that buffer. And you can't always stop and just say, okay, there's conflict. I have to go do my 20, 30 minute, 40-minute meditation. I'll be back. Because while you would progress spiritually very, very quickly doing that, it's not necessarily practical. So I had to think of, how do we make this practical? How do I practically apply this way of activating the heart-crown connection? And what does that really mean? How does that work when I'm interacting with my children? Now, we all know the concept of loving kindness, right? To me, this is the ultimate practical application of that. Because when you activate your heart, it's not just about what's happening around you, but it's what happens through you. And if what happens through you is you are filled with this delicious, wonderful, fuzzy, warm, pink, loving energy, then that's the ultimate place to come from. But it's hard to get there, right? We have to develop the will to do that. And we have to have ways to do that that don't necessarily require always leaving the situation, always stepping into a massive spiritual practice. So one way that we can do this is through self-love. Now, I know that that's another loaded word, so I'm going to break it down to what I mean when I say self-love. When I say self-love, I mean simply activating the heart and having that loving energy moving through you. So self-love, activating that heart-crown connection, is going to be a game changer when it comes to parenting. Now, a lot of times when we hear self-love, self-care as a parents, we think, oh, I need to make time to get my hair done. I need to make time to take a bath. I need to have, sit on Netflix, whatever little thing it is that we see as doing a nicety for ourselves. However, ultimately, I believe that self-love is truly having that moving through you and then being able to come from that space. And anything which takes away from that is cutting into or lacking of self-love, right? So using that definition, when we are in a conflict with our children, are we, whether we think we're being nice, whether we think we're doing the right thing for them or not, whether we think we're teaching the right lesson, are we feeling that calm and that peace? Are we imbued with that loving energy? Are we in a state of self-love? Is our heart and our crown activated? Because if not, are we actually being loving in that situation? So what I would like to see happen is for parents to start removing all of the emotional baggage around the word love and being able to understand that energetic presence that we can have, the power that we can have in doing that. Coming to it with love, feeling that safety, feeling that emotional buffer so that we can show up in the best way. Now, some other really beautiful things that happen when you energize or activate your heart and then activate the crown is that you actually have a deeper connection to divine intelligence. That means when you're sitting there going, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, and you are coming from your solar plexus and you're all stressed out and you're trying to figure out how to handle the situation, and you're looking for what is the answer. Through activating the heart crown, you actually get those answers much more quickly. Those answers come in a much more calm way, because you're never going to get the answer that you have to do something that's harmful to somebody, right? And we know when we've done something harmful because it feels horrible inside of us if we've cultivated that awareness. Now, again, I believe I'm speaking to a crowd of people who are more spiritually aware, people who are pranic healers and have taken Arhatic yoga. So you understand what I mean. You're starting to develop that energetic awareness and that ability to sense and feel energy. So you can feel when things don't feel as well when you are working with your children. And you can see the results. You can see if it's working or not working. Are they happy? Do they feel connected after the conversation? So you can have greater access to this divine intelligence. You have greater access to your intuition. You have more of a desire to work things out and create harmony and to come at the situation as a state of oneness. So what we want for our children are all the things that I'm describing, not just for us. We want them to have them. But the way that we can best give that to them is not through saying, okay, you have to sit down and you have to meditate, you have to do this, you have to apologize, you have to, right? They need to see us drink the Kool-Aid first. So if you're doing your meditations and you're blissed out, but then when it comes to your daily life and having to have those interactions, you're losing it, then you need to be bringing this heart crown connection into those moments. Because what your children see, they don't see your meditational experience. They may see that, yeah, for a little bit after mom or dad does their meditation, yeah, they're really calm and they're really happy. But then they see, well, they tripped over my shoes and they were yelling and they were upset. So we want to set an example for them that these things, that they work. We want them to see the benefits, right? And we want them to kind of drink the Kool-Aid, right? We want them to get on board. But if we're not showing them how that really applies and why it's practical in our daily life, they're less likely to naturally come into that and naturally go, oh, how do I do that? But when we come from our heart crown connection, when that's just simply radiating from us, that naturally is going to activate their hearts more. And what happens when the hearts are activated? They feel calmer. They feel more peaceful. They're more open. They're more receptive. They now have access to all the amazing things that are happening through their crown chakra. This is why it's a win-win. You can't force this to happen for your children and then have the benefits come back to you. It has to start inside of you. You have to develop the will to do this. And then that radiates out into your environment, into the interactions with your children, and into your home. So one other way to look at this is we often talk about giving and receiving, right? So we're taught that as we give, we receive. What we do to others comes back to us, right? The golden rule. However, I'm going to challenge you to look at this a little bit more deeply and a little bit more immediately. You are already the giver and the receiver. So as you give, you can't give anything without immediately receiving it. You can't give love to somebody without love passing through you. Now, for those of you who have done the meditation on twin hearts, you understand this concept of being a channel, right? So whatever we are directing at our children, that is what we are a channel of at that time. You have anger, you're being a channel of anger. You have stress, you're a channel of stress. There's no good way. I mean, perhaps there are people who are this developed, but I would assume if you are this developed, you're not watching me talk today. There may be people who are developed enough to be having anger and having it, feeling it through them, and yet somehow magically disconnect and not let that anger be getting to someone else while they're yelling, while they're having all those emotions, right? But for most of us, just as average people, what's happening for us is that the energy of those things is coming out of us as a channel towards our children. And yet somehow we're expecting them to have open hearts, to listen, to be compassionate, to say, oh yes, mother dear, thank you so much for educating me on why I need to clean my things up. Oh, I'm so grateful, right? That's not realistic, and it wouldn't work for us. So when we apply that concept of immediately being the giver and receiver, you can also realize that whatever you're giving out to them, you are immediately receiving. So if that is happening and you're feeling anger and you're giving out anger and you're immediately receiving more anger, it's building, right? We all know what that fiery feeling feels like of anger building up. Then that is going to cloud your ability, is going to energetically interfere with your ability to be connecting with your child's heart. And that connection is what's going to give you the receptivity, the understanding, the desire to work in harmony, and to be of service to one another. So how do we interrupt that? How do we interrupt that giving and receiving cycle? How do we interrupt our own processes around thinking that that we can have this energy and yet somehow we're going to come to a harmonious conclusion, a harmonious solution with our children. And when we think about it too, very young children, right? They can't even respond differently. They're very much overwhelmed by our energy. So when we are putting that out into the environment, that's going to have an impact. So when I say being a pranic ally, it's how are you going to use that energy? Are you going to be an ally? Are you going to be using that as a way of healing? Because no matter what, you're putting out energy. So what are you going to put out? How are you, where are you going to come from? How are you going to impact? Because you can't not impact. You can't just be walking around, interacting with people, interacting with your family members, and not have an impact on them. Now, that doesn't mean, just to clarify, that you're to blame for every problem that ever happens. It's when you take control of, when you step into your ability to activate the heart-crown connection inside of yourself, when you can come from that well of love, then the water on the outside doesn't get into the boat and it doesn't sink the boat. So that when the situations arise, it doesn't mean that no problems are ever going to happen. It means when the problems arise, you are more capable of dealing with them. You're more capable of making choices that align with your soul. And we know when things don't align with our soul because they feel badly inside of us, right? So I'm just looking at my notes for just 1 second before I move on. So when we can take control of what's happening inside, right? Then we can actually start to change our thoughts, change the way we think about things. And then it can be acted out more fully in our day-to-day life. It takes practice. It takes a commitment to doing this. The first step is starting to understand it, which is what we've been working on. So now we're going to talk about how to practice it. So one way that we can practice is through saying things to help activate our heart chakra. Now, every major religion in the world has this idea of loving kindness, has the idea of coming from the heart, of love, of compassion, of working together. If I'm wrong, someone please correct me. But to my knowledge, all major religions have this in some form or another. So what if ultimately the underlying silver bullet is simply activating your heart so that you can have an activated crown and have this connection to bring out and live from in your daily life. So we have all kinds of tools, meditations, and other things, but I'm going to teach you a very simple and effective way. And when I say simple, that doesn't mean easy. You do have to practice. And I highly recommend practicing at times that are not don't carry a lot of weight with them, right? You want to be practicing throughout the day on a regular basis. You don't just want to wait for a high intensity situation to arise and then think that suddenly you're going to be able to pull this out of your hat and it's just going to work perfectly, because it's not. It probably won't. But if you practice, then you can bring this forward. So it's just like, think about a basketball player. They practice all the time and then they perform at game time. When it comes to parenting, you practice this on your own. You develop this skill. You lift the energetic weights, right? You lift those spiritual weights to be able to call on this so that when it comes to a game time or a conflict, you know what to do. And it will happen more naturally as opposed to having to force yourself, right? Where you're saying the right words, but it's not quite working. It's not feeling like I was describing what I went through when I was reading a lot of the parenting books. So just take a moment. I want you to just close your eyes and relax. And just take a few cleansing breaths. And then take a drink while you do that. I want you to bring your attention to your heart in the center of your chest. And just say, I love you. I love you. I love you. You can be super silly about it and say, I love you. And you can immediately start to feel a change in yourself as the heart activates. And as this happens, everything starts to soften a little bit. You can open your eyes if you'd like, or you can continue saying, I love you if you are really enjoying that right now. And it's such a simple thing. We don't realize how easy it can be. By simply taking time every day to say, I love you to your heart center, you will naturally be developing these heart crown muscles, right? So just like it's, if you have a big heavy door that you haven't oiled and it's all stuck together and occasionally you open it, right? There's a lot of effort involved in that. But if you've taken care of that door, if you open it every day, if it's well oiled, then when you go to get something out, it just swings right open and it's easy and there's no effort. We can start to develop that within ourselves. Many of you know how to do the meditation on twin hearts. So you understand this concept of activating them and working these muscles. I want to encourage you to start practicing this every day. Every day. Take, as often as you think of it, take the time to say, I love you. This is because you deserve to feel that at all times. There is never a time when you deserve to feel anything less than the most radiant, divine feeling of love flowing through you. And the more that you can do this, the more that you can show up calmly and peacefully when you're having these interactions with your children. Even if it's the things that stress you out the most, it will give you a little bit of a buffer. You can take this more deeply, because I know in parenting, there comes a lot of guilt, a lot of, am I doing it right? Or when we mess up, oh no, I didn't do it right. You can use this as a way to help balance those emotions back out instead of allowing them to kind of settle and grow. You can use this to help to alleviate those when you start to feel them. And one way you can do that is by saying, I love the one who feels. And you can just say whatever it is. I love the one who feels angry. Or I love the one who is angry. I love the one who is sad. You can get really detailed. The more truth and honesty you bring into this, the more effective it's going to be, because what you're effectively doing is in activating that heart and flooding yourself, your aura, your being with this pink loving energy, is you're beginning to transmute those things so that they don't settle into you, so that they don't become a repeating thought and part of your identity. So if you feel like, oh no, I'm a bad parent because I always do this, or even if you think, oh, my children are bad because they always do this, this is a really simple and effective way that you can apply the benefits of this every single day. So you can get really detailed and say, I love the one who is furious because my child did not do well on this test. And instead of sitting with that furiousness, you now have an activated heart that's starting to transmute that, that's starting to help you let that go. And the more that we can forgive, the more that we can let go of these little microaggressions that happen between us and our children, the clearer the channel, the clearer the connection is between your hearts. And the more you are connected strongly at the heart, the more you can recognize, the more you can show up for them, because you know what they need more. And for them, and we all know this, if you have, especially if you're a pranic healer, you definitely know this for sure. If you've been to an event and you have met with a truly, genuinely loving, massively heart-centered person, someone with a very well-developed heart chakra, you feel peace around them, right? You feel calm around them. You feel loved. Even if you don't know them, even if you just met them for the first time, you feel overwhelmed with love for them, and you feel loved. And we want to be able to be that in our lives for our children, because as you kind of approach that spiritual teacher, feeling like a child, needing to be taught and ready to receive, you're more willing to listen to what they have to say because your heart is activated, because you're receptive. We want to be able, for our children to be able to come to us with that. We want them to be able to come to us receptive, to be willing to listen and learn from us. You don't learn well from people you don't like. You don't learn well from people who you're frustrated with and upset with. Most of us don't learn well from being screamed at. So we shouldn't think that it would be any different for our children either. And this is the way that energetically we can apply these principles of oneness, of loving kindness, through activating the heart crown chakra connection. And let that radiate out into our lives and imbue all of the interactions that we have in our families. The other thing that happens, sometimes people get concerned that if they're too heart-centered, if they're too loving, they're going to get walked all over, right? And that's a genuine concern from parents. If I'm too nice, they're not going to listen to me. They're just going to walk all over me. This is the difference between just simply doing something nice, because you can do something nice for someone through gritted teeth while not wanting to do it at all, right? We smile, we do something nice, even though inside we're like, oh, I do not like doing this right now. You can't love like that. If you look at love, and we look at it in the way I've defined as being an energy, right? Then you cannot do it through gritted teeth. You cannot do it in a way that comes with frustration or upset. You can only do it in a way that is genuinely heart-centered. So nice and love are not the same thing, right? And sometimes the most loving thing that we can do is to tell a person no. It doesn't mean just being a pushover and letting them do whatever they want. You still have to have boundaries, but the boundary is your own love. Am I coming from a space of love in doing this? Or does making that decision shut down my heart? Does making that decision not feel good? Does helping them in that way not feel right to me and not connect with my soul? When you can practice this, you'll start to know more and more, when is my heart activated? When is it not as activated, but I'm doing something nice? And you can see the difference in it, and you can show up and make your decisions in a better way. Because sometimes we do things that we think are nice, even though we know that they aren't feeling right inside of us. So it helps us to discern. And the more that we choose this, the more that every time you say, I love you, every time you create the response that no matter what happens around me, no matter what the situation is, I deserve more love, not less. I deserve to be a channel of love through this. The more that you do that, the more you're also going to activate your will centers, the more that you are going to develop a will to be in that loving energy. And you cannot have a strong will and a strong heart and be coming from a space of divine love and be negatively impacted through that. At least that's how I see it. If you're coming from that, then what's inside of you feels good. You feel safe. You feel taken care of to show up in the ways that you want to. And a lot of times when we are having conflicts and we're stepping into punishing or things like that, we're actually coming from spaces of fear, anger, and stress. So in my opinion, activating the heart-crown connection is just the ultimate win-win for parents and children. And especially as pranic healers and people who practice Arhatic yoga, you should absolutely start bringing this every day into your parenting, so that you can show them why the practice that you have through your meditations and through pranic healing, like how they can start to use it, because they can start to use it too, and they'll see the effects, and they'll see how good it feels, right? And that's what we ultimately want. When we're looking for parenting help, we want a different experience of parenting. So this is one way that you can have that. I think we're probably pretty close to time here. Let me check the chat. Okay, we have about 9 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? I can try to answer a few quick questions before we move forward. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So I do apologize for the noise. Apparently, there is some maintenance happening that I was unaware of right outside my window now. So If you hear anything, that's just what's going on there. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's a little harder um, to check the chat. Well, I guess I could add just one more thing. When you say the I love yous, you can actually reprogram your subconscious, right? So we all have a reaction cycle. When things go wrong, when things happen, we have our way of reacting. And we know what that is. We feel it in our physiology. We feel our heart speed up. Maybe your palms sweat. Maybe you feel pressure in your temples. We all have our way that impacts us. By saying the I love you, it's a way of actually interrupting that reaction cycle and creating a new response pattern. When you create that new response pattern, you actually reprogram the subconscious. So the way our subconscious mind works is that whatever is the most kind of whatever we've been programmed with or heard the most, whatever's the most pervasive thing, it's going to rise to the top in stressful situations. Now, many of you have probably heard Master Co say, big fish eat small fish. Big fish eat small fish. The more you say, I love you, the more you create a new response program of I love, that's how I react to things. The bigger that fish gets, the more that big fish eats the small fish of I get angry, I yell, I do these things. So in case you are interested in sort of the neuroscience of why it works too, it's kind of just a win-win on all levels. Okay, I think somebody sent a question here on my phone. I need to brighten my screen. Okay. When disciplining teens, it's hard to activate your heart when you know they're doing something wrong. Of course it is. Of course it's hard. It isn't easy, but it's simple. That's why just you don't go into a gym and try to bench press 500 pounds, right? You don't try to swim across the ocean when you just learn how to swim. You have to create a practice of it. And this is where I say, don't wait for those high intensity, high stress moments to do it. You have to practice it on your own. So take time, even if it's just every evening, even when it's driving in traffic. You can do this anytime and no one ever has to know you're doing it. And that's something that I think is really amazing about it too. It doesn't take a lot of setup. It doesn't take clearing a space for it. Anytime you think of it, you just practice it. And even if it's 5 times now and 5 times tomorrow and you forget about it for 2 weeks, every step that you take towards doing it, the stronger and more easily the heart is going to open up and create that for you. When you can also apply this to other people. I always encourage starting with yourself and working through yourself first. But if that's just not resonating, you feel like I need something to do for somebody else, because a lot of times we do. You can do the same exact thing, but for them. So you said you have teenagers. Whatever your teenager's name is, you can say, come into your heart, because they're probably not very receptive, right? If you tell them the things they're doing wrong, they're stepping into their own independence. They're becoming who they are. They're not really wanting to be governed as much as maybe they were previously in the earlier years of their life. And the more that we come at them with kind of constriction, the more constricted they're going to feel. And the more constricted they feel, the more they're going to act out, the more they're going to make choices that just simply to be able to flex their independence. So you can come into your heart in the same way and say, I love the one who's doing whatever it is you think they're doing wrong. So if I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but whatever you think they're doing wrong, you can send love to that. You can say, I love the one who does not want to listen to me. I love the one who's not receptive to the information I'm sharing. And what you may find is that these things also apply to you. That loving the one who is not receptive, it's very likely you are not receptive to their reasons and what they are describing for why they're choosing the actions that they're choosing. I love the one who is doing something that's wrong, right? I'm sure that there are times in your life where you have made mistakes that you maybe haven't fully forgiven yourself for yet, right? So all of those things, all those energetic influences are coming in to your parenting. And that's part of why we get scared and we freak out and we try to control things because we know from our own experiences. But at some point in time, we have to just be the well of love and understand that they're going to make mistakes and they're going to learn from those mistakes. But that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other thing. But do the I love yous. That way, when you come to them and you talk to them about what it is, it's not coming from a place of control. It's coming from a place of genuine, heart-centered activation and love, because energetically, they're going to feel that. And if they feel that, they may be more willing to listen and understand than to, if they know that like you're saying sweet words, but they can feel the control underneath it. Okay, we had another question here. My 11-year-old daughter always resists when I or my younger daughter try to hug or kiss her or want to show her affection. She runs away or resists. Any reason why, or what should I do to get her to be more loving? Okay. Well, let's reframe it. Why does hugging or kissing have to be a way of loving? Why can't she be loving in a different way? So you're expecting something of her, wanting something of her, wanting certain behaviors because those behaviors make you feel more safe in her being loving. But part of why she may be acting that way is because the energy of you're needing it, wanting it as a form almost of reassurance or control. I mean, she just has her own reasons. I can't say what her reasons are. I'd have to talk to her and find out, But what I would suggest in this situation is to give her the space that she is looking for, so that she does start to feel that she has a sense of control over her body and her autonomy, so that she can come at you with a loving and giving heart when she wants to give that. Because if she's not wanting it and it's being pushed on her, energetically she's putting up walls. Energetically she's trying to push off and resist. She's coming up with resistance, right? So if her energy is resistance when you do this, then your behavior towards her is not cultivating the energy you want from her. Does that make sense? So if we take away all the emotions around it, because I absolutely understand why you would want what you want, and why that may feel uncomfortable to not be able to have that interaction with your child. But if what you want from her is an open and loving, receptive heart, you have to create a condition for that to be able to unfold. If what you're doing towards her creates an energy of resistance, you're not getting what you want. You see? So we have to go a little bit higher. We have to think from kind of a higher perspective. If we just take out all the emotion, we just think of it in terms of colors, like think of paint, right? You want pink paint from her, but whatever you're doing to get that from her is causing her to throw out orange paint. So you're not getting what you want. So the only way to change that, because you can't go inside of her and you can't make that change inside of her, you can't force her to do that. And the more you're forcing, the more orange paint you're getting. The thing to do would be to step back and allow her, show her the benefit. Drink the Kool-Aid, right? If hugging, if kissing, if these physical acts of love create a benefit, you want her to be able to have time and space to observe that benefit through you and other family members without feeling pressured to interact. And when she is ready, if that's something that's actually right for her soul, then she can have the space to relax into that. But the more that she feels pressure, the more she's going to put out an energy of resistance. And that's actually creating exactly what your heart doesn't want. Your heart wants that closeness and that connection, right? But you're getting resistance. So stop doing the thing that creates the resistance so that your hearts can connect more deeply. And if you have trouble just simply inside of you accepting that, which I would 100% believe is happening, I want you to just close your eyes for a second, come into your heart. I want you to say, I love you. I love you. I love the one who wants to be hugged. I love the one who wants to hug her daughter. I love the one who does not feel safe not being hugged. Thank you for being a kind and loving parent. I am safe to take time to wait for those hugs to come. I love my daughter, and I know that she loves me. I am safe to make space for her heart to unfold. And just continue to send yourself love around that. In case there's any guilt or judgment that you feel, you'll know best. You'll know best what's inside of you. Just kind of let it unfold. This really works like peeling an onion. You know, you can think, I'm angry. I love the one who's angry. And then all of a sudden you go, well, actually, I'm kind of sad that this happened. I love the one who's sad. And I love the one who feels guilt. And you can kind of just let it unfold and go deeply and sit with yourself and find out what it is you're feeling. And that's where I said the more detailed, the more honest you can be in what you're feeling and send love to that. It's like, you know, going from shining a flashlight to lasering in on what it is. So yes, we have this huge, massive love energy that's coming out, but you can also kind of condense it and put it right on exactly the thing that you need. So when you say, I love the one who's angry, you're directing that loving energy right towards the anger, which for those of us who know more about how energy works and transmuting energy, you can understand why when you have this kind of like darkness of anger, stress, and you shine the light of love into it, the benefit that that's going to create within your energetic system. Okay, I think we have another question. Yeah, I would work on, if you're a pranic healer, you know a lot of ways to do this. So I'm not going to go into the ways to do it, but I would work on diffusing your judgment that your daughter is not loving because she's not taking these actions. And I would work on celebrating the ways that she is loving. So you can do that by every time you see her do anything that's kind or loving, you can mentally thank her. Thank you for being so loving. send the energy of gratitude towards her so that you're diffusing the energetic blockages that you've sort of created in yourself through this judgment that she's not loving because she doesn't take a specific action. You can also, just kind of celebrate it by saying, let's see, what are good words for it? Congratulations on having such a loving heart. You can say that through yourself to you, and you can say that, mentally to her. I don't think it's going to go very well at her age to kind of like walk up to her and just be like, congratulations on your loving heart. Like you're not using it as a manipulative technique of like, I'm trying to get your heart to open, but you can use it as a genuine expression of love through yourself towards her. I'm just reading real quick. Yeah, that sounds great. The chat says, when healing children, I always approach parents to heal the disturbing behavior in themselves also. After explaining perception and projection influences how our energy flows from environment and through generations before. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much involved in it. And when we start to look at it energetically, I just found for myself that a lot of things I was reading were very mentally based, how we're looking at things on the mental level, how we're acting things out on the physical level, how we're handling things. A lot of things said, just be calm, count to 10. And I was like, but that doesn't work for me. So through developing spiritually, through Arhatic yoga, through understanding more about energy, through pranic healing, that's where I realized that the energy is really kind of the golden thread that ties it all together. It's really any situation that you want to improve, if you simply shift into looking at it energetically, look at what the energy is that's coming through, you can have a much clearer, less emotionally driven, less mentally impacted through subconscious programming, and you can look at that and you can have a more positive influence. And the more I looked at, well, what positive influence, what's the most positive way I can do it? What's the easiest way I can do it? What's something I can do in those most stressful situations? Activating the heart for me has just become the absolute answer to that, because it helps with the energy, and then that impacts all the other things. It impacts our subconscious mind, it helps us emotionally, and then when you have it in your heart and head, it can come out in the hands, right? It can be physicalized into the world. Okay, well, if anyone has any other questions, you can feel free to contact me. I believe that my information is going to show up along with this video, or you can just look up Parenting Through Prana and you will find me. Okay. Yes, somebody has a question here. Okay, did you have a question? Repeat the technique. Okay. So you're going to just, you're welcome. Focus on your heart. And then you're going to say, I love you. And I know that this technique seems super simple because we think, oh, saying I love you, not a big thing, right? But usually we're saying that without doing it. So I encourage you to not dismiss it, but to just simply sit and say, I love you. And it's okay if it doesn't feel genuine. And it's okay if it unlocks a bunch of emotions. And it's okay if it seems silly and pointless for a while. But that's because it's showing us how much more we need it, how much more we need to activate the heart, how much more space we have to fill with that light of love. And then you can go deeper and you can say, I love the one who, and just fill it in with whatever you're feeling. There's no wrong thing to feel and send love to, because when we look at it energetically and we remove the emotion of love and you look at it energetically, what part of your life, what part of you do you want to shine more light into? What part of you do you want to transmute? The negativity that you may be feeling, just think of it as darkness, and the love is the light shining into it to help clear a path. So it doesn't matter if you are thinking the most horrible thing in the world about your children. That is the place that needs the love the most. I love the one who is thinking this. I love the one who feels this. And if you start there, that's just a good place to start. There are so many more steps that you can take, but that's an important place to start. That's the foundation. And of course, if you're a pranic healer, doing meditation on twin hearts is a wonderful way. Oh, did my signal go out? Can you see me now? Maybe it's because I was in the chat. Sorry, I was in the chat. When it does unlock the emotion, should you wait to approach the situation? All right, I gotta go back to the chat. When it does unlock the emotion, should you wait to approach the situation until they clear? Stress about the situation and anxiety. I think you have to determine that for yourself. You have to decide, obviously, if it's a situation of danger, your child's running into traffic, you don't stop and say your I love yous and calm yourself down before you save them from getting hit by a car. But if this is not an emergency situation, if you can take the space, then I would encourage you to try to do that. I think one of the fallacies of our parenting paradigm is that things have to be handled right away, that you have to have everything figured out and solved in that moment. And usually what's going to happen is you're going to be met with non-receptivity. Because if a person, like, let's say you have children and one smacks the other one. This happens, right? Just happens. It's just the way it is. Children hit each other. Then if you come in and you start scolding the child, they're already, obviously, what would it take to get you to hit somebody? How would you have to feel? How angry, how distressed, how out of control would you have to feel? Now, if at that moment someone came in and started yelling at you, how receptive are you going to be? You're not going to be very receptive. They want you, basically, you're yelling at the child saying, oh no, you have to be more loving. But that child is in no way at a capacity for love at that point, right? They are not in a loving state. And you're not coming from a loving state while telling them that they have to be loving. So in that case, I would, do your best to separate the children, make sure no more harm is coming. Take a break from it. Take a break, heart center yourself, because you want them to understand the benefit of coming from a heart-centered space. If you aren't coming from a heart-centered space while talking to them about why they need to be heart-centered, I think we can see the disconnect there. And if what you want is to help them understand that when they are feeling angry, when they're feeling upset, they want to shift into a loving heart-centered space. They want to have more emotional control and maturity. You have to show that and exercise that. If you don't exercise that and show that, then how are they going to learn it? They aren't going to learn just from hearing you. I think that's one of the funniest things that I have found as a parent is I wonder, where did we ever get the idea that the way to educate children is through their ears? Where did we ever come up with this idea that by speaking words to them and it going in through their ears and into their mind, that was the ultimate, optimal way of reaching and teaching them? Right? So we tell them things. We're like, listen, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. When really, coming from our hearts and helping them feel. You learn more quickly from something you feel, right? I can tell you all day long and describe what a smell is, but if you've never smelled it, you don't know. If you haven't felt pain, you don't understand pain. If you haven't felt love, you don't understand love. No matter how much I tell you about it, you can't really understand. But feeling a wave of heart-centered loving kindness, that's an education. They feel that, they understand that. They feel your anger when they've done something wrong. That's an education. They understand. So it's, how are you wanting to educate them in that moment? If you can be heart-centered and you can deal with that conflict right then and there, then go for it. If you can't be, then maybe try to take some time. And what that will also do for you is it will help to create a sense of safety within you, because if you feel that you have to deal with things right away, it's coming from a sense of feeling unsafe, that things have to be handled or else something bad will happen, right? Or else this, or else that, or else my child's going to go on a spree of hitting every single person until I somehow handle this. But usually that's not the case. It's usually an irrational fear within ourselves. Okay, go back to the chat. Good. I'm glad that that's working out for you already. You're already getting opportunities. There will be no shortage of opportunities to try it. And it's not going to, remember that the point is, making you okay inside so you can show up the best to these situations. The point, if the focus comes away from that and the focus becomes on creating something outside of you in a certain way, and you're going to be upset without it, you're not doing it, right? So it's coming from a space of manipulation, or a space of I'm going to love you until, that doesn't feel love. But if you're genuinely in that heart-centered love, we actually have more compassion and more space for people to be whoever they are, doing whatever they're doing, and be willing to understand without needing to be in control of what they're doing. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions, and we are definitely well over time. So I appreciate everybody who showed up for the live and everybody who's going to watch this on the replay. If you have any more questions, or you want to find out more about what I do, just look up Parenting Through Prana. You'll see that on social media and my website. Oh, now we got more comments coming in. Okay, these are going to be the last ones. I would assume that the replay is going to be here wherever you are watching it once this ends. Usually if you do a Facebook Live, it shows back up as a replay, or on YouTube. Or you can follow the Institute of Inner Studies and see how they will be posting that. I don't understand the question. The question is, can this technique be for our passion? I don't understand that question. Yeah, you can absolutely say things like, I love music. That's fine. Yeah, I love the one who loves music. So part of what you want to say, I love the one, right? I is our soul self. I, the soul, love the one. You think unity consciousness, the one. It's not, even though we're doing it for ourselves inside of ourselves, it's also the one, the greater one, right? So it's kind of a little secret in there. And when we talk about the one and the unity, right? Heart, crown, we have more desire to be of service to the greater whole. Okay, we have more messages now. Okay, so the Institute for Inner Study says that the YouTube account will be for the replay. At this time, I do not conduct programs for children to attend. Um, that may be something in the future. I actually am in the process of publishing a children's book. So there, if you go to my website, there is a spot where you can pre-order that, and then that has actually some activities and stuff. I highly encourage parents to be learning this and then do what feels right and sharing it with their children. But if you have a personal question about how to do that, you can send me a message or something. Um, yes, if you want to be a good pianist, this doesn't have to, that's a very good point. Okay, this doesn't have to be just for like negative things. You don't have to look for something wrong to love. You love all the time. So somebody said, can I use this to become a better pianist? Yeah, you can. You could say, I love the one who plays very well. I love the one who always touches the right keys. I love the one who has, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know enough about playing the piano. I love the one who reads the music perfectly. You can use it just as much as we can use it to transmute the negative. You can use it to simply just beef up, power up the good things that you want more of. So if you have trouble sending loving energy to things that feel negative because you have a judgment around them, you can simply focus on good things. Um, Unfortunately, with just being on my phone doing this, it's going to be difficult for me to put my website in there. It may show up with the video. Otherwise, just look up Parenting Through Prana and you're going to find me. Okay, I'm going to go now. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of the questions, and I hope this helped. And if you want to learn more, you know how to find me. You can just email me more questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. You're welcome. Okay. All right, I think I'm just supposed to leave, so I'm going to go. Thank you. Bye.